Ladies and gents, welcome and thanks for joining me here in Resolving Reality. As usual, please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos, and also follow the show on X at ResolvingOr. The email address for the show is contactorr@protonmail.com. So we have the Irish government insistent upon signing up to another United Nations Global Compact on Migration, not for the first time, trying to pack them in like sardines as usual. So we'll talk about those things and the connections with the UN, the Green Agenda, and some other bits and pieces from Ireland and abroad as well. So here we go.
Firstly, the department will be provided with state lands to quickly bring on stream accommodation through renovation and through rapid build modular units. Secondly, the department is being supported financially by the Department of Public Expenditure through the new capital ceilings agreed today to allow the targeted purchase of medium and larger properties in turnkey or near current turnkey condition. And thirdly, the government has agreed to further extend planning exemptions to allow for the conversion of commercial properties to IP accommodation with a focus on empty office blocks. Given the current downturn that we're
All right, so not only are they content with using residential, now we're going to try and go commercial now. So now they're just kind of coming up with solutions out of the blue now and trying to pack them in anywhere they can.
We're seeing in the commercial property sector right now. My officials have identified the potential for accommodation at scale to be sourced and converted using this approach.
Right, so there we go. Trying to take over more and more land and appropriate land and properties to try to fit in more migrants. So you can see the government is absolutely, if it wasn't clear already, they're absolutely bending over backwards and actually putting in thought to how they can ruin the country by shoving more migrants in there. And this little piece here you can see on the screen is from the Irish Times. So it says more than 2/3 of people in the Republic live in homes that are too big for their needs. New research by the Economic and Social Research Institute has revealed, right? So I'm sure they're impartial, right? Compared with other European countries, the study found that housing units in the state were on average bigger with fewer people living in them. In other words, the Republic's homes have more bedrooms than the occupants require. All right. So straight away off the top, we can see what's the government up to here with this. What's the Irish Times up to? They're pushing another piece of propaganda, not for the first time, it's another government allied rag, and they're pushing this notion. So you can see they're trying to condition people into thinking that, well, you know, we are wasting some rooms here and stuff. So now I want to look at the subtext as usual, right? So as usual, you don't need me to read you the papers or just report on the events. Let's look at what's it's really saying, what it really means here. So on the screen there, so Marxian ideological gaslighting. So the ideology pushing all this stuff, as I always say, is the international revolutionary ideology of Marxism. They're trying to dominate things, and they are dominating things. Well, dominated things up till now, right? So they're using a little bit of gaslighting here, trying to con people into thinking that they have too much. So you see the top sentence there, those with more should give to those with less. Now, where have we heard that before? The whole take from the rich, give to the poor thing, right? Now, in the middle of the page, one of the elements of Marxism is anti-capitalism, right? It's because they're always trying to push their socialist ideas, this crappy, ever-failing alternative system to capitalism. So there's always anti-capitalist undertones to the stuff that they do. So that usually means an attack on wealth and the whole anti-bourgeois undertones, right? So bourgeoisie or bourgeois is the rich, pretty much. So that's what they're kind of suggesting there. Some people have too much and they need to give it to those with less to make things more equal, quote unquote, right? So it's the enforcement of artificial equality, trying to enforce that artificially. The next slide then, or the next image then. Right, so this was picked up a while ago by lots of different content creators in Ireland. They actually saw it on the Patriot's Derek Bly's one of his YouTube videos. He mentioned this. So this has been around a while. So the 39th Amendment of the Constitution, I believe this is trying to make its way through the process. But let's look at the wording here, right? So the bottom of the page. The state accordingly shall delimit the right to private property where it is necessary to ensure the common good, right? So that's open to interpretation, and to vindicate the said right to housing for all residents of Ireland. All right, so resident can mean anyone in the country. So we can see that's most Africa and the Middle East as well. So anyone from anywhere in the world can be classed as a resident. And it says the state, so the government, this trader government we have, has the right to encroach on the right to private property, essentially, right? So for the common good. So they are deciding what the common good is. They did that in COVID. They've been doing it recently with the ever-increasing amount of migrants. They're doing it with the hate speech bill. So they're clearly deciding what the common good is and what right and wrong is. So this is just waffle as usual, right? So we're playing word games here. So, and appropriate to need as well. I forgot almost forgot that. So the state in particular recognises the common good as including the right to secure affordable, dignified housing, appropriate to need. Now that's another clue that there's Marxism is at play here, and I'll come back to that because one of the famous phrases involved with Marxism is from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Right, so need, there we go. Right, so if someone doesn't have something and they want it, then according to these crazy people, they should be given it because they need it, right? So the next slide then is kind of the next image is kind of my edit. It's from a book of some information contained in the Communist Manifesto, right? So this is because the way it's laid out in my Communist Manifesto doesn't look too tidy, so I reformatted it slightly. And this is the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. So at the top, so the Communist Manifesto, for anyone who doesn't know about this, should know about it. It was authored, a few editions, but published generally in 1848 by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. The Manifesto of the Communist Party, and more of a, not a book, but just more of a publication. And they had their 10 planks. So we'll have a look at the top there. So number 1, this is their recommendations to how to create a better world, a communist utopia, right? That's what they're working towards, a communist utopia, quote unquote. So abolition of private property and the application of all rents of land to public purposes. So that can be, again, open to interpretation. The state decides what is a public purpose and takes control of things. So this is Socialism 101, the state control of the means of production and distribution and control of private property and so on. So the ultimate goal, for those who don't know who are watching, the ultimate goal of socialism is to eventually create a communist society where it's a stateless, moneyless, atheistic state or country. So the second one there is a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Now, people associate the tax with the capitalist system. This is related to something later in the video, but I want to just remember that underlined in green, because tax, such as the carbon tax, is related to the green movement. But back to the third one, the next one is abolition of all rights of inheritance, right? So if you have land in the family and it goes back, and obviously this is has been traditionally the domain of the rich, then this is to be in a communist system. You're not allowed to have this. So in other words, it's the same thing pretty much. It's appropriating private property from people in the name of the common good, quote unquote. The fourth one is confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. Then that's open to interpretation as well. What's more, confiscation of land. So I'll leave the rest of them. But the first 4 are forms of theft, right? So in socialism, Margaret Thatcher famously once said the problem with socialism or socialists is that they always run out of other people's money, right? So it's a form of theft. Now, I'm not saying that, say, people like Roderick O'Gorman or the Irish government, Eamon Ryan, and all these characters involved who are certainly globalistic, that they sit around reading the Communist Manifesto at night. I'm not suggesting that. This is bigger than individuals or groups. I'm talking about the ideological driver behind all this. So if we learn the code, you learn to understand what Marxism is, you can find signs of it and evidence that something's kind of going on here. So to add on to what I was saying, here is something from the desktop here. So there's a PDF document from the International Organization for Migration, Ireland. Right, so it's another UN-orientated globalist organization. I'm just going to scroll down here. So the current Minister for Justice, this is from a while ago, this document, but I just want to look at the forward here from Helen McEntee. It's the middle of the page, right? So I am accused, this is just McEntee just justifying, in the document she mentions about, we support the mass immigration, the usual nonsense, talking about them, the Department of Justice being in support of this for quite a long time. So in the middle of the page, I'm acutely aware that a lack of security of staff status in the country can leave people more vulnerable to the dangers of exploitation. So that's another key word. when you're dealing with Marxism and Marxist cult members, or what people call globalists, is they're obsessed with this idea of oppression, right? Workers' rights and workers' exploitation. They have it on the brain all the time. So vulnerable is another way. Vulnerable people are prone to being oppressed, right? So some unscrupulous employers can and do take advantage of people, oppress them, who are in a precarious legal situation. I'm fully committed to introduce a regularization scheme for the undocumented by the end of this year. Support trusts like blah, blah, blah. So and encourage people who currently live on the margins of our society. So this is those in oppressed classes, i.e. migrants and so on. So, this is a person like many of the other traitors in Ireland who are just brainwashed, and everything they do, their raison d'etre every day is to try to destroy the country, whether they realise it or not. And they're jabbering on about here as if they're nice people trying to protect someone. That's the brainwashing again. So Marxists are destructive by nature, but they think they're benevolent, and she actually thinks she's doing something benevolent here when she's talking like that. So that's just more a typical Marxist cult member talk. So one of the consequences of this globalist revolutionary activism, or Marxism, as I always say, Marxism and globalism are the same thing. One of the consequences of this is economic ruin, right? So anyone who's looked at Marxism for even just 5 minutes can see that. It goes way back. We'll say we'll pick the French Revolution as a marker, right? So the late 18th century. But then we talk about the Communist Manifesto in the mid 19th century. But since that point and onwards, when you had all the different Marxist groups, one of their obsessions is the capitalist system. Right, so their system, socialism, is supposed to be better and more just and more reasonable for society, and they're obsessed with this idea of being against capitalism. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that people who are brainwashed, these what people call lefties and liberals and progressives and globalists, these Marxist cult members, I'm not saying they all wake up in the morning thinking about how they're going to destroy the capitalist system, but they're certainly brainwashed in that they think it's evil, and that money's evil, prosperity is evil, and that it should be destroyed and replaced with socialism. So even whether or not they openly talk about it or not, amongst other people, or they advertise it, it's part of the ideology, is kind of bigger than any one person or any one group. And what I'm saying is the consequences of having a Marxist infection in your country, like Ireland does, is that they tend to destroy the economy and destroy prosperity everywhere they go. So you're looking at, say, one classic example is the climate change movement, right? They're obsessed with this idea of saving the planet. So more egotistical, revolutionary, activist ideas. So, how arrogant can you be thinking you can save an entire planet, right? Based on some theories, pretty much, right? So we won't even go there. But in their efforts to save the planet and to save us from destroying ourselves, because they're so wonderful and virtuous, they will try all these mad ideas, including the green agenda. So they're going to pour billions, trillions even, into trying to go renewable, quote unquote, energy resources and so on, which ends up just crippling the economy, because those types of energy resources are never going to be sufficient to power our grid, and they're just going to waste a load of money doing it. So that's been happening in Ireland just like in anywhere else. So one of the consequences of a Marxist infection is economic destruction. It's either a directly or indirect attack on the capitalist system. Another example, an obvious example, is the carbon tax, right? So you're punishing people for their industrial output, if they've got conventional means of production, quote unquote. So it's another attack on capitalism. Another example is mass immigration as well. As we can see, one of the consequences of bringing, it's no joke, bringing millions of people from one part of the world to another part of the world, and it puts a lot of strain on the country, destroys things economically as well. So we have to watch out for that one. The anti-capitalist, economy destroying consequences of all this activism, right? And Ireland, we'll move on to a bit of more climate change stuff here now to see how they're trying to put this into practice. So this next image here is from the Business Post, right? So just news recently about the government plans to, try to push the green agenda here as usual. So new tolls, road taxes and congestion charges plan to fill 5 billion hole from fossil fuel phase out, right? So this is typical. The review of transport tax system will seek to fill a 5 billion hole in the public finances from loss of petrol and diesel tax revenue based on transport electrification. So in their efforts to push this green agenda, as usual, it has a massive impact on the economy, and it starts to drain the coffers a little bit. So to make up for that, they are is going to start bringing all of these taxes and congestion charges and so on. So absolutely ludicrous. This is typical of what they do. You don't want to let Marxist cult members anywhere near government, but in particular not near the economy, right? Because they are parasites. They are prosperity parasites. They drain the finances from a country, whether they mean to or not, because they're obsessed with this idea about saving the planet, which many people can see is a hoax and a load of bollocks pretty much. So they're literally inconveniencing people, taking their money, forcing them, trying to force them to go electric and so on, which none of that is going to have any positive impact on the planet. It's just going to destroy the country economically and put unnecessary burden on people. And on top of that, as I've mentioned in other videos, remember that the new communist alliance countries, right, countries like the People's Republic of China, Russia, North Korea and Iran, there's no green agenda in those countries. They do what they want. They slap up power plants, they slap up nuclear power plants, they keep building fossil fuel, they try to get more resources. They're not playing this green game at all. So what happens is there's a differential created between the Western countries and these other countries. And as I've said before, I believe there's going to be a war soon, right? That's what they're building up towards, and there's no way the West can fight when all the soldiers are confused about their gender and want to put on dresses, and there's nobody signing up, and everybody hates the military anyway nowadays. So that's the weakening of the armed forces in the West, combined with an economic weakening through the green agenda as well. So the West has just been weakened left, right and centre, and it's thanks to absolute rubbish like this. So next image then we have, or it might be a video actually. Oh, there we go. Right. So this is connected in with the United Nations, as has been talked about before. The Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030 and all that stuff. So it all comes back to the United Nations. So as many people in Ireland can see, the Irish government doesn't answer to the Irish people. The Irish government is more allied with the international conglomerate organisations like the European Union and the United Nations. These initiatives are coming down from these globalist, well, especially the UN, globalist Marxist organisations who don't respect sovereignty and who sit around pontificating about how people should live their lives, right? So this is courtesy of Linda Moo, I'm going to say, on X, right? So it's a really clever image here, right? So Sinn Fianna Fáil, right? So these are the four big characters. Well, one of them is an X character, but the four major characters in Irish politics recently. So Leo Varadkar on the left, Mary Lou McDonald of Sinn Féin, Micheál Martin of Fianna Fáil, and Eamon Ryan of the Green Party on the right. So Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party were in government, and Sinn Féin are one of the bigger parties in the opposition, quote unquote. Now I just want to look at the symbol there is the important thing, right? So you can see the symbol, little circle that was shaped like an eye, in the middle is empty, and around the side you've got all the different flags and stuff like that, right? So globalist imagery straight away from the United Nations. So it shows you who they're playing for, what team they're on. It's pretty much what it is, right? So this is typical in politics. We have all these traitors, and they well, Varadkar's half Irish, so he's half a traitor, but they are all playing for the same team. They're not allied to Ireland. They're all answering to, and they're obliged to play ball and go along. So that's why they're all part of the Sustainable Development coming from the United Nations. So here's a video here from the UN website. Right, okay, so straight away off the top, it said to end poverty. The world's best plan, well, according to them, the world's best plan to end poverty, number one, and number two, to end inequality. So straight away we know that that's Marxist. That's Marxist talk, right? There's always been poverty in the world, and it probably will always be poverty. The idea that you can eradicate poverty is just a socialist fantasy. This is typical cult member talk. And inequality as well. Obviously he's got Marxist toned as well, so the whole idea that we're all equal and there should be no classes, right? So we're back to that, trying to build a communist future with no classes. So responsible consumption and production. So like they're always trying to take digs at the capitalist system, right? So this their whole philosophy, their whole ideology is based on the idea that you can't run a business, make money and make profits. You can't do that without exploiting people, right? So that's immoral according to Marxism and the Marxist prophets, like Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and everybody after them, pretty much. So they see that as a problem. So that's why they're trying to stick their oar in and trying to dictate how people run businesses and how money is made and so on, if at all. Good health and well-being, right? So we've seen what they've been trying to do with the whole green agenda in terms of our foods. They're trying to push people to eat degenerate, unnatural diets like veganism, to reduce the amount of meat people eat to ridiculous levels if they're going to eat meat at all. Trying to encourage people to eat insects and stuff like that, and getting people to just eat salads all day. So remember, everything that they do has some sort of an agenda, and they're trying to push something. Fish. Clean water and sanitation. That would be nice, actually. Yeah, they could start by taking the fluoride out of the water. That would be good. Here's the planet there with the eye. Okay, so more eye symbology. So we saw the eye with the pendant, the Sustainable Development Goals pendant that we saw the 4 traders wearing a few minutes ago. So here's another eye for you here. So the planet is a pupil now in an eye. Life on land. Okay, right. So life on land has been around for, depends on who you want to talk to, right? Thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, millions of years, according to some people. What are they trying to say here? Peace, justice, and strong institutions. That's funny, right? So peace, first of all. I'm trying to remember the source of this quote, but actually I've got one for you. So Bella Dodd was a communist whistleblower in the US. She's heavily involved with the communist movement there, and she said, I'm paraphrasing here, she said this in a lecture at Fordham University in 1953 or 54, 55, I'm not sure, but she said to the communist, peace means the victory of socialism. So the UN was set up as a peace organization, and so what they mean by peace is that there's no ideological opposition to them. First of all, justice, well, we know what they mean by that, social justice, right? So their version of justice, strong institutions, right? So institutions that are going to push Marxism. Affordable and clean energy. That's funny. Yeah, so I'm sure you've all noticed how the electricity bills have been going up in recent times, and I actually interviewed Dr. Chris Evans on this show a long time ago, right at the beginning when I was a rookie. He's a great man, Dr. Evans. He used to believe in the climate movement, but then speaks out against it. You should check out him. ScienceSpeak.com is his website, and his wife is Joanne Nova, who's another great anti-climate change voice. And he said years ago in that interview, the production wasn't very good, but we had a really good chat, and he was saying that in order for the Greens, these watermelons, right, the Marxist Greens, red on the inside, green on the outside, in order for them to make the climate change system seem viable financially, they have to start jacking up the prices of conventional fuels. So that's usually what happens again when they start getting involved with economics. So affordable and clean energy, that's funny. So, it's a economy crippling energy, and it's not going to be affordable because it's not efficient. So, while we're on the subject, as I've said before, the most efficient energy source we should be going for is nuclear power. But obviously, if you've got a bunch of traders running the country, I wouldn't put them in charge of running the sandwich. But when we do sort things out, nuclear power is the way, which would solve all of these problems with power output and affordability. Cheap power, cheap unlimited power. There we go, gender equality. Okay, so that's one of their sustainable development goals, is pushing Marxist activism, pushing feminism as well. So all of the secretary generals in the United Nations going right back, Ban Ki-moon, the new guy Guterres, what's his name? I forgot his name. The African leader. I'll come back to me in a second. They're always coming out with feminist initiatives and feminist agendas. That's a big part of their ideology as well, quality education, right? So quality education, we know what that means. Quality education means they're going to start, a lot of these weird sexual stuff is going to come filtering down from the United Nations. So kids are going to learn about all sorts of weird stuff, sexual stuff in school at younger ages, and also be brainwashed with climate change movement. We'll come back to that later. So quality education. By the way, plank number 10 of the Communist Manifesto was free education for kids in public schools. So we know why they want to control education. It's to brainwash the kids, and that's just for a university, not just a kindergarten, play school, primary school, high school, secondary school. Not just that, but up to university as well. Zero hunger. So there you go. Another, back to the same stuff as before. Another Marxist fantasy. So there's a whole myriad of reasons why people are unequal economically, and countries aren't run all the same. So zero hunger. So what's that supposed to mean? You go to places where they don't have any food and bring them food, right? So you bring them food, being charity and NGOs and all these UN organizations and initiatives. If you're bringing people food who don't have the food, why don't they have the food? Do they live somewhere with no food? Is it because they don't know how to farm? Why don't they know how to farm, right? And so on. There's a whole myriad of reasons. So this is just more Marxist talk as well. They're trying to fix problems that may not be fixed. Reduced inequalities, more of the same shit there, right? So they're talking about economic equality, but then in terms of social justice and rights and what people call liberalism. So revolutionary social justice, Marxism. Sustainable cities and communities. By the way, that word sustainable is a key word used by the United Nations and any big Marxist groups, the Green Movement, right? So this comes back from the whole thing of Karl Marx in his work wrote about how capitalism had the seeds within it to sow its own destruction, basically. So basically the capitalist system was designed to fall apart, and that's just the way capitalism is. So what this word sustainability is based on another con job, another lie, that we need to change how the world is run in terms of business and economics and so on, because it's going to fall apart and explode and from the climate change, because capitalism is evil. It's producing all this pollution, it's using up all the resources, it's not sustainable, quote unquote. So a big savior organization like the United Nations needs to step in and stop the world from destroying itself. So that's more of the same crap there. Right, so that was more the old UN propaganda there, right? So it's good just to have that as in our minds as context whenever we're dealing with them. It's just Marxism rebranded. That's all it is, right? So the next bit then is right. So this character here is Ghebreyesus. I forget his first. Tedros Ghebreyesus, right? This guy is a Ethiopian cult members. This guy is an Ethiopian. He's in charge of the World Health Organization, and you'll get a lot of the characters, the Secretary Generals of the UN and the WHO going back years, are just socialists, right? They're Marxist cult members from whichever country they're from, and that's why they're in these positions. This guy here, actually play this first, and then we'll expand on what this guy is all about.
Food systems are harming the health of people and planet. Food systems contribute to over 30% of greenhouse gas emissions and account for almost 1/3 of the global burden of disease.
Okay, well, all right. So this is back pushing the Save the Planet Green agenda again, veganism, eating leaves, eating insects and so on. Going after the farmers as well. So that's why they're going after the farmers, trying to force them to go green.
Transforming food systems is therefore essential by shifting towards healthier, diversified and more plant-based diets. If food systems delivered healthy diets for all, we could save 8 million lives per year. WHO is committed to supporting countries.
They come up with these mad figures, right? So this is more typical Marxist shit. They're trying to scare you and use emotional manipulation and to try to brainwash people. So how on earth can you calculate something like that?
To develop and implement policies to improve diets and fight climate change. I'm therefore very pleased that over 130 countries have signed the COP28 UAE Declaration on Climate and Health. Together, we can protect and promote the health of both people and planet.
So that guy Gebreyesus there is just pushing the vegan agenda as well. It's funny you brought up health, because if veganism, if people went veganism en masse, you'd find out pretty fast what happens to people dying younger and being sick, living on that degenerate New World Order diet of veganism. They're obviously, anything they push, never for benevolent reasons, right? So that's why they're pushing that. But the guy Gebreyesus, this is his background. This is an article from a couple of years ago from Reuters, right? So Ethiopia says WHO chief, so World Health Organization chief, has links to rebellious Tigray forces, right? So it's the Tigray Liberation Army or whatever, I forget all their names. But so he was involved there. So WHO Director General Secretary General Tedros Ghebreyesus previously served as the Ethiopian Health Minister and Foreign Minister. It was being blocked from getting through to his home region, Tigray. So there you go. So he was involved with that group when he was younger, right? And so he's playing the humanitarian card as well. So there we go. Sorry, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Right? He was involved with that group going way back, right? So this is what a lot of the groups do. They are, when they're not in charge and they're small and they just have a few guns and they're the rebels, quote unquote, they find ways of swindling public support and sympathy from other groups and trying to get resources off them and so on. So this is typical looking at his background there. So that's Gebreyesus. He's the guy, Gebreyesus. He's the guy in charge of the WHO. So here's another character for you now. So the next clip here is the Christmas message by Antonio Guterres, who is the current head of the United Nations. Right. So when you hear this piece of waffle here, this was just released just after Christmas, I think.
2023 has been a year of enormous suffering, violence, and climate chaos. Humanity is in pain. Our planet is in peril.
So humanity is in pain, planet's in peril. Okay, yes, the planet has feelings, remember, and it's hurt.
2023 is the hottest year on record. People are getting crushed by growing poverty and hunger. Wars are growing in number and ferocity, and trust is in short supply. But pointing fingers and pointing guns lead nowhere. Humanity is strongest when we stand together.
Humanity is strongest when we stand together. So there's another Marxist catchphrase there, or reminds us of another Marxist catchphrase of solidarity, unity, right? We are all one, we are all together. So, we all suffer together, blah, blah.
2024 must be a year for rebuilding trust and restoring hope. We must come together across divides for shared solutions, for climate action, for economic opportunity and a fairer global financial system that delivers for all.
What they mean there is socialism, right? So fairer economic system. What do they mean by that? We already have economic systems that have been around capitalism has been around in some forms for thousands of years, right? Exchange services and goods. So what are they talking about? So this links into the World Economic Forum, another Marxist organization as well. These are all set up to try to push the ideology of Marxism through different means.
Together we must stand up against the discrimination and hatred that are poisoning relations between countries and communities. And we must make sure new technologies such as artificial intelligence.
So there he's talking about hatred and discrimination. So that's again pushing the social justice stuff, what people call cultural Marxism. What he's hinting at there is racism and blah, 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 and that there needs to be less. So they need to have more control of those things. Now he's talking about AI.
Are a force for good. United Nations will keep rallying the world for peace, sustainable development and human rights. It has resolved to make 2024 a year of building trust and hope in all that we can accomplish together. I wish you a happy and peaceful new year.
That's lovely, isn't it? Makes you feel nice. Makes you feel nice and warm, fuzzy inside. So these big organizations are insinuating that we can't survive without them. Right, they need to justify their existence, in the words of George Bernard Shaw. So they're trying to push these notions that there is a need for that organization to have these members all over the world to try to dictate how countries go to, do things. So he was talking there about this guy. This is Antonio Guterres, by the way. He's the head of the United Nations. So he's talking about human rights and social justice and all these different things, as if they're a benevolent organization with a nice piano music in the background, that they're nice and safe and they're positive, and this virtue signaling tone of the video. But let's remember that these guys are the ones who are facilitating mass immigration on a global scale. From what's happened on the southern border in the States with Mexico over to what's happened in Eastern Europe, or Poland, or, down to Greece, the coast of Italy, down in Spain, Ireland, all across the world. The United Nations has been involved here. So they're in no position to lecture anybody about or take this pontificating approach or virtue signaling approach that they actually are benevolent organizations. So that's one area where they're destroying the world. Another one is also through the radical sex ed stuff. So all this weird sexual shit coming down, these initiatives are filtering down into the education systems, come from the United Nations and also UNESCO, which is the United Nations Education, Scientific, Cultural Organization, or whatever it is. So these guys are guilty of a lot, and it's like nutjobs like him sitting there saying stuff like that. Unbelievable. Before I forget as well, sorry, this guy Guterres, he was a member of the Portuguese Socialist Party, right? So he's socialist. He was also Prime Minister of Portugal from 1995 to 2002, and he was head of the Socialist International from 1999 to 2005 as well. So this guy is what I like to call an avid, lifelong Marxist cult member. I'm not surprised he got that post at all, right? So you should see his Twitter feed. So just constant Marxist garbage. So next clip here is from Irish media, making a little documentary clip here, talking to school children about climate change.
Is climate anxiety something that's actually happening to you guys or your friends, or is it something that you're experiencing?
Personally, I've had a good few conversations with my friends where they just feel so much emotion and they're so raw about the topic that it's overwhelming.
And do you think...
Now that is absolutely criminal, first of all, indoctrinating kids into this crap. So what a loaded question to ask. Do you have any climate anxiety? Or things that, kids could be thinking about in their life or just focusing on growing up. What a negative, pessimistic piece of nonsense to inject into the mind of a young person.
That people are losing sleep, your generation.
I'd say that possibility is very high. We could do something to stop this, but we're not. We're wasting what time we have to do something about it.
She's right. So there's not one thing that the male kid and the girl said. There's not one thing that they said that they didn't hear from someone else, right? So there's a saying we have in Ireland: they didn't lick it off a stone, right? So where do they get those ideas from, right? Obviously, they're talking to adults who brainwashed them. Now, those kids could have been brainwashed anyway. Maybe RT News contacted a school or somewhere else and said, we want to talk to a few kids who are, interested in climate change. Maybe that's how it worked. Maybe they're already brainwashed and the reporter wasn't brainwashing them. But obviously we know what this piece is. It's just a piece designed to push climate change. So I think the teenage boy was saying about his friends that it's overwhelming and stuff. Nothing they said comes from their own mind. And this is criminal stuff, because when it comes to Marxist activism, as I've always said, and you're looking at Greta Thunberg here, when she came on the scene, I was convinced straight away that I knew what they were up to. What they're trying to do is trying to brainwash kids into being little revolutionary Marxist activists, and a good issue to use to make them go down that road when they're quite young is climate change, because it's a soft issue. It's about, the planet, and it can be a little bit separate, and it's not too political and too gory, right? But it's a good way of brainwashing the kids. Has been highly effective, and Greta Thunberg was part of that. So when I say climate change is a Marxist sub-agenda. So you've got feminism, socialism, multiculturalism and diversity. These are all Marxist sub-agendas. The pro-Palestinian movement as well. Climate change. These are all based around the oppressor versus oppressed principle, which I've talked about in previous videos, that somebody or something needs saving. In the case of climate change, the planet needs to be saved and we need to do it. So these kids are being brainwashed that they actually, they're barely they're just kids. They can't do anything. They don't have any life skills. They don't have any knowledge. But they think that the planet needs to be saved because of what they're being indoctrinated with. So absolutely criminal behaviour. So there's Greta Thunberg there, yeah, held up as a hero. This is footage from one of the climate strikes in Dublin, right? So it was these student protests of brainwashed kids in Dublin talking about saving the planet. This is from a few years ago.
Keep your carbon in the soil! No more coal! No more oil! Keep your carbon in the soil! We came out.
Keep your carbon in the soil, all right. So these kids, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just repeating slogans. And they're part of something. They're turning up for an event. They're feeling that cult-like environment, Marxist cult environment, where they get to feel good and be part of something, and make some noise. And they're being told it's a good thing for them and that they're doing something positive.
Here today to make our voices heard because we believe government officials aren't doing enough to help climate change in our world today. Because we are the future, and climate change is what's going to affect us most.
We are the future, climate change. Okay, great. So again, nothing he said there came from his own mind. It was all handed to him. You are stealing our future. Okay, so emotional manipulation. Now, not for the first time in the history of what people call communism or Marxist activism, kids being used to leverage, emotional sympathy. This is the same ideology that's killed millions and millions of children, right? Countless amount of people almost. But, here we go. We're supposed to believe that... we are stealing their future by doing things how we've always done them. Now the kids are going to tell us how to run the society pretty much.
So we need to do something about it. I feel very proud and happy that so many people care about it, because for a long time I felt like it was an issue that many people didn't care about, but coming here today, this makes me really happy.
So look at those faces, okay? You can actually see the pleasure on their faces. They're smiling. They're actually enjoying themselves. Now, they're enjoying themselves because they're kids and they're part of something. They're making noise. They're having a laugh with their friends, and it's something for them to do. And it's something for them to do, and they're getting that buzz. But what they don't realize is that they're participating in Marxist activism, and they're becoming brainwashed because that community feel, that feel good feeling of being around other people who are on the same page as you, can be manipulated. In this case, it's being manipulated to push climate change.
I'm here because I don't think the government is doing even nearly enough in terms of climate change. It's so focused on Brexit and other issues, but our main issue and our main focus should be on climate change and should be on introducing new laws to support this planet.
No, it shouldn't.
There's no point planning for a future which we don't currently have.
Nonsense.
I can't even put it into words to see the amount of people who support this.
Look at all those signs.
And who want this to happen. And the government should realise that it's our future as well. So that there are so many young people here who want it to be changed, then something needs to be introduced to stop this from happening.
There you go, more smiling face. This is absolutely disgusting behaviour. Now the parents could probably be brainwashed themselves and that's why they're there. Or, which is a little bit more sad, maybe their parents are level-headed people and are not brainwashed, but their kids have gone to school and they've been told this by some Marxist cult members. They're teachers, the commissars of education, I call them, and they're brainwashing them, they're turning up. And by the way, there's several of these protests in Dublin and around the world as well. They were called climate strikes, right? So that's another clue that you're dealing with Marxism. Back to the climate strike, because one of the things in Marxism was the labour movement, right? So the labour movement was, the workers' rights and all that. Get out and fight for your rights. You're being oppressed in the workplace, right? You have to fight for better wages and so on. So that name, climate strike, is kind of it's got Marxist DNA, but to someone who doesn't know Marxism, they're not going to notice that. But now you know. So whenever you see climate strike, that's where it comes from. It's just a reference to the labour union movements in Marxism going back centuries. So they're trying to, again, it's moulding kids into being Marxists.
What do we want? What do we want? Not more pollution. We need a solution, not more pollution. We need a solution, not more pollution.
So you see, he's enjoying himself there. That's his little few seconds of fame there, and he's getting a buzz off that. Some of them might just be there for the day and maybe they'll go away after, or they'll be stuck like that their whole lives, and that's what happens. So from the ideology's point of view, the more people who get involved, the better, because not all of them are going to stick. but many of them will. So, this is what the ideology of Marxism does. It dominates society as best it can and tries to suck many people as possible into the cult. And you can see that they're enjoying this. So, the indoctrination, when it comes to indoctrination, pleasure is a very important element to that. So, pleasure is a great way. When people are feeling good, is a great way of indoctrinating them because their defenses are down and they're feeling good. It becomes their nectar almost, this kind of a revolutionary environment where they're in a crowd and so on. There's no plan.
For generations, people have known it's an issue, but nothing's been done about it, so it's time to step up. And, for my kids and my grandkids, I need a planet for them to be on. And
there's a good chance he's not going to have kids or have grandkids for that matter. He just said that there would be no planet for his grandkids. There's probably a good chance he's not going to have any kids. He might be sterile. Maybe he's a vegan. Maybe he's going to be sterile. And, it's getting harder to have partners nowadays. That's if he's heterosexual. So, all load of nonsense as usual.
At the moment, 25 years, 30 years, I don't think we're going to have one.
Save our planet. There is no planet B. Look at him. Sure, the diners thought was that. They had time too.
I think it's incredibly important. I think it really shows that people, and particularly young people, care.
Right, there we go, the Green Party. The Green Party, right? So of course they're involved. But like I was saying, another Marxist organisation. So this is the most of the protest culture. Even, and it's going to shock some people me saying this, right, because obviously I support the idea of nationalism, that's the way out of this mess, but even elements of the nationalist movements in Western countries are contaminated with Marxist thought. An example of that would be, we need to take power off the government, and the rich capitalists are the ones doing all this, so more Marxist thought again. But so it's not just within the leftist movement and so on, but obviously the Green Party would be involved here. What a shocker.
And part of me, it makes me really, really incredibly happy to see them all out here. Part of me is really sad because when I was in the Green Schools Committee 14, 15 years ago, I thought that we would have had this sorted. I think it's time for the government to listen to these people, to the young people, to the other people, everybody who's calling for overall systematic change to combat climate change.
She said there, so it wasn't like that back in her day at school. So in other words, Ireland has gotten worse now. Now Marxism, before it used to be, remember in her day, it probably would have been in the universities only. As you've all seen, they're getting control of the education system at younger and younger ages. So, and she's obviously delighted about that because she's brainwashed. She thinks Marxism is good, but this is terrible. This is a terrible thing that now Marxism, revolutionary activism, has gotten its claws into people when they're younger. She also mentioned as well that the government should be listening to people. Kids are in no position to tell society how to run. I don't care whether they're brainwashed or not. Kids should be just kids, or school students should be just going through, have their life experiences, get their education, so on. We shouldn't have teenagers or people younger trying to dictate how society should run for a myriad of reasons. One of the reasons being they don't have the life experience and maturity and are too vulnerable to Marxist indoctrination. So, this is all just typical.
Climate change is the biggest crisis we're facing, and this isn't exaggeration. This isn't scaremongering. This isn't anything people will call it on Twitter. This is reality. This is the result of decades of inaction. I'm not a politician. I'm a 15-year-old terrified by the reality of climate change and terrified by the fact that the people behind us are doing nothing to...
So this is actually sad as well, because not only will a lot of these people grow up, these young people grow up to be enemies, right? They'll be enemies of the country that they're in. Like all Marxists, they're brainwashed to be traitors towards their own country and ruin their own country. Not only they become enemies as well, but it ruins their lives. Like all Marxist activism ruins people's lives. So there's already been a lot of problems in society with anxiety and depression because of people's diets, lifestyle, and so on. The last thing we need to inject into the mixture is this notion that the planet's going to end, in a few years, because kids who are brainwashed with Marxism will actually believe that they're being told this. They don't have the knowledge or the intelligence to see this is all just Marxist propaganda. So this is actually very, very sad. It's ruining countless lives. So the younger And in my opinion as well, because I understand Marxist indoctrination quite well, the younger people get brainwashed, arguably, they may never snap out of it, you know. Maybe if someone's in university and they get a bit brainwashed, maybe there's a chance they might snap out of it. But if you're brainwashing 9-10-year-olds in school, they may never break free. And obviously once they get gone with the climate change movement, they'll probably be on board with veganism as well, and the females especially will be on board with feminism and stuff. So before they're even out of their teens, they're already brainwashed in a whole different bunch of areas to support Marxist activism. So this bit here, just kind of adding on to what I was talking about last day, I talked about cultural degeneracy a little bit. It's one of the symptoms of a Marxist infection, is that the culture and the arts and entertainment starts to go down the toilet in a big way. Everything becomes full of degeneracy, and it's either brainwashing people, particularly the young, or it's just pushing degeneracy, which is a form of brainwashing as well. So things start to go to shit. Now, as I mentioned before as well, one of the pillars, the three pillars of Western society, that three of the main pillars that Marxism attacks is the 3 C's: capitalism, Christianity, and culture. And we could add on to that as well the destruction of the traditional family unit as well. So, but when it destroys, they all obviously help each other. And when it destroys Christianity, one of the things is, ostensibly Marxism is atheist, right? But on a deeper level, it's actually satanic. We'll come back to that later. But on surface level, it's atheistic. That's where they're pushing atheism. And when you're looking at Western countries that are traditionally Caucasian, Christian countries, capitalistic countries, when Marxism enters the picture, as we've seen in the 20th century, the Christianity, the adherence of Christianity and the power of the church and so on goes down, and there's less people believing in the notion of God. So one of the hallmarks as well of a Marxist infection is when destruction of Christianity. So when you take the Christianity out of a civilization, or these Western countries, when you take Christianity out of the picture, which Marxism has pretty much almost successfully done in quite a large degree in a lot of Western countries, something needs to fill that vacuum, right? People don't just believe in nothing and stay atheist. Some people do, but there's a void that needs to be filled, and that's why something fills that void. And that's why now not only are we seeing degeneracy, but we're seeing almost satanic kind of themes starting to creep in. I mean, this has been going on for quite a while, but it's becoming more progressive. So when countries become devoid of Christianity, something's going to fill that void. It might be another religion like Islam, or it might be Satanism, but something needs to fill that void, and that's what we're seeing happening here. So this clip here is Sam Smith, the English singer. I don't really know much about him, but I've seen bits of him in the press, and he's becoming progressively, transformed, shall we say. So we'll just have a look at this clip here. So this is an overweight gay man on stage in a corset and stockings, right? Look at that. People cheering that. To each their own. To me, this is degenerate trash. Right? So that's one example. And he not really so much satanic themes in there, but that's Samson. He's been all over the place wearing all sorts. And, this is one example of that. This one's a little bit closer to home. So the entry for the Eurovision Song Contest this year in Ireland is a young female who is identifies as being trans, and she goes by the name of Bambi Thug, or Country Ray Robinson.
Music has always been a massive part of my life. I like to scream, I love to rap, I love jazz, I love singing. You can't put me in a box, and if you do, I will break out of the box, or I will redesign the box. Doomsday Blue, the song, is to do with being overlooked, about having your potential ignored. Eurovision is such a giant platform, and Conchita Wurst opened a lot of doors for people like me who are more of the obscure side of things. As a non-binary person, I do represent a massive proportion of our country that is underrepresented.
A massive proportion of our country that's underrepresented? I don't think so.
I just believe that we need to send somebody who can command a stage that big, and I definitely can.
So you'd see with our choice of clothing and stuff going on there, we can see this is the, you know, an average everyday person here, right? But this is our live performance on RT television a while back as part of like I believe it was like part of the selection process for Eurosong.
I know you're living a lie. I guess you'd rather have a star than the moon. I guess I always overestimate you.
Right, so have a look at that. So you're looking at two demons, looks like, on the stage. She's wearing a lot of goth makeup and an outfit, right? So we'll see what else is going on here.
All the things that you do. I'm down in my doomsday blues.
So have a look at the screens at the back there, right? So more eye symbology. There's kind of a pupil in the middle with this kind of emanating light from these eye shapes. See that? So we've got it looks like occult or pagan symbology on the screens as well.
The thoughts in my head, the places I touch when lying in bed, the visions of you, the words that you said.
Places I touch when I'm lying in bed. Okay, yep. She's wearing like the Celtic, what's called a Trinity knot or whatever on her forehead.
My heartbeat buried in the ground, and to the strings I bind your bound, so when you sleep you'll hear my sound.
I'm not hearing any music so far.
I know you're living a lie. I see the scars in your eyes.
So notice the style of the imagery here as well. It's like almost like brainwashing type of stuff. So people sitting in that audience, the majority of them, are not going to understand what's happening right now. So, you know, this is the slippery slope of degeneracy here. So, you know, this is the Irish people who were conditioned or were Catholic before, mostly, you know, the whole Protestant thing, but mostly Christian, we'll say, in the whole island. And now they're being conditioned into being brainwashed with occult symbology here and right in front of their eyes.
I know you're living a lie. I guess you'd rather have a star than the moon. I guess I always overestimate you. Who do all the things that you do? I'm down in my doomsday blue. Guess you'd rather have a star than the moon. I guess I always overestimate you. Who do all the things that you do? I'm down in my doomsday.
So red light. Okay, so Brendan doesn't know anything about this kind of subject matter, right? So red is regarded as the color of a low vibrational frequency, right? So there's kind of connotations there. Again, to the untrained eye, people might not see the significance of red that much, and like looks evil or whatever, right? Or that might be as far as the imagination goes, but it is symbolic of a lower frequency, of the idea of people being on a lower level of consciousness, pretty much not being kind of switched on to what's happening, which is kind of a recurring theme in the world of the occult when people are brainwashed and so on.
Romance, I'd beg, steal and borrow. It's draining me hollow. You, I guess you're slow dance me out of my sorrow. Your favorite color compared to the others is doomsday blue.
Look at the crowd. It's another genre as well in the same song. With the strobe light, with the screaming. Heavy on the drums. Check out as well, you can see the pentagram, that's her name on the screen background there, Bambi Thug. So if you see the B to the left of her, just to the right of that, there's a pentagram as well. So we know where she kind of leans. The thing as well here is that And there as well, another thing is on the screen on the wall at the back, so you see the hexagrams, right? Each hexagram has 6 points, right? And as many hexagrams, so they're seeing 666 constantly on a visual loop. It's actually, well, so, you know, you think that Ireland, look at Ireland, I mean, Ireland punches well above its weight when it comes to artistic merit and creativity. It's got a very strong traditional history of songwriting and musicians and stuff like that. And this is what's representing Ireland. So it's just another example of another medium being used by the Marxist cult and the international globalist movement to push more degeneracy, right? So you think of the amount of males and females of all ages who could represent Ireland, but they're being discriminated against because they don't identify as being trans. Now, another thing as well is I'm sure she is. There's I'm sure she actually believes that and so on. She could be putting on an act as well. That's part of it. So from the desktop, this is a part of our interview with go full screen there. Part of our interview with the Gay Times. Right, this is an excerpt from one of our interviews. So here's just from the middle, right? So I like being part of a cool, queer, rising scene. I also didn't have that growing up, so it's important to have people you can relate to and have music that speaks to you and allows you more freedom to be yourself. More queer voices is what the world effing needs, right? So that's pretty sure that's what she said. So that is where we are right now in terms of what's representing Ireland. So obviously there was nothing at all about that performance or the music or anything really that was Irish there at all. So this is not just anti-Christianity and promoting Satanism and so on. It's also anti-culture and therefore anti-Irish. So it's just another element of Marxism and the slippery slope of degeneracy, that one of the casualties of that is culture. So this next bit here then is something I spotted on the news. This happened over in the States, in the Boston area. So it's to do with the black community in Boston. So as I was talking about before, because when you have a Marxist society, it divides people into groups, the oppressor and the oppressed. So any of the Marxist sub-agendas like feminism, black rights and BLM or mass immigration, there's always people divided into groups. One's the oppressor, one's the oppressed. And those in the oppressed group, the victims, quote unquote, tend to develop attitude problems. And it's the same such in life. If you pamper someone and they never get criticized in their life, they end up being a little bit spoilt and they end up with a sense of entitlement. So we're seeing this all over the place, not just in the States, but in Europe as well. People being, they're being put in getting this privileged treatment, right? They're not being treated fairly, and a differential is created where those in the oppressed class, so-called oppressed class, are being given all this privilege. Those in the oppressor class, white people, white heterosexual people, are not, and somehow that those in the oppressed class are owed something by those in the oppressor class. So here's an example of this that was in in Boston in the States with the black community there. I'll just play this.
On the white church in Boston to join us in supporting a black reparations movement.
Standing in solidarity, clergy leaders from across the city of Boston gathered for an interfaith, multiracial meeting at the Resurrection Lutheran Church in Roxbury, Nubian Square. They're here to ask the religious community to atone for black Boston suffering and support black reparations.
And we are coming, as Dr. King said, to get our check.
Organizers from the Boston People's Reparation Commission say they're also following up on their demand on the city of Boston for a $15 billion initial payout to begin the process towards repair and reconciliation to the city's black community.
$5 billion as initial payment around cash payouts.
Billions.
$5 billion around strengthening our financial institutions, creating a new black bank. $5 billion in terms of addressing issues of the education achievement gap between blacks and whites.
In 2020,
so they want free money to try to, again, this is more Marxism, try to enforce artificial equality by taking money that doesn't belong to them and trying to do their own thing with it. So, it will just be ridiculous if this succeeds.
22, the Boston City Council and Mayor Michelle Wu offered an official apology for the city's involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. She also launched 2 task force research teams to study Boston's role in slavery and its long impact on descendants.
This is typical of Marxist historical cherry picking, right? So you hear a lot of this crap. It was involved with the BLM movement as well, trying to push this false notion that whites have been the traditional oppressors, the traditional instigators of slavery, and that blacks have been the victims. That's absolute nonsense. If an honest 5-minute study of history will show that all of the ethnic groups engaged in slavery in the past and even enslaved their own groups. So what Marxists do is they cherry pick. She said, that one, that mayor or whatever is going to do have research teams look into Boston slavery. If you go and look for examples of white on black slavery in the history of Boston, you're going to find it just like anywhere else. Even if the Marxists don't find it, they tend to fabricate things anyway. So that essentially proves nothing. So this is what happens when you let them get in charge. They just dream up these scenarios and they start having society. And again, back to the financial and economic stuff I was talking about earlier. So Bostonians or whatever, white people in Boston are expected to pay black people reparations for slavery, something which doesn't affect black people in modern day Boston at all. It affects it's like me asking for financial compensation from the British Crown because Irish descendants 200 years ago were killed by the British or something like that. It's ludicrous. So this is what happens when you let these nut jobs in power and they start getting these ideas into their heads and they see oppression everywhere. There's going to be groups that are going to take advantage of that if they're not brainwashed themselves, and that's what we have here. So talking about billions here, just chucking billions at this group for no reason at all.
So we still suffer from the trauma of those instances, and even today, dealing with racism.
There we go. So just to add on to what I said there, see what he said there is attempt to justify it. So I just said that slavery in the past doesn't affect black people of today at all, right? But he said, the trauma and, the racism and stuff like that. So again, more Marxist talking points to justify stealing other people's money, which is what it is.
Saturday, this group called on the white church in Boston to support the black community for its association in slavery.
Today we call upon this city, its financiers, and its white churches to stop the shirking, stop the lying, tell the truth, and pay what is owed.
Organizers.
So that guy, that's Reverend there speaking. I mean, well, we all know the state of the church now, and I'm sure there's plenty of good people still in there, but the churches in the West have become highly contaminated now with Marxism and what people call globalism. So, they're always able to find at least one or a few people in those groups who are going to agree with them and who come out in support of the Marxist agenda, which is what that guy there did there a moment ago. This next clip here, kind of on the same subject, another clip I noticed here on X from Nova Scotia in Canada. So this is a bunch of students, again, not white students, again, more Marxist brainwashing, where they're actually protesting because of the academic grades. They're not able to make the grade, essentially. So it's justice, not our rights, right? So no more failing grades. Okay, right. So the system needs to change. So if I go and do an exam and I can't pass it, it's not my fault. Maybe I'm too lazy. I haven't studied, or I'm not particularly intelligent. Rather than me having to accept that reality, now the system needs to change. So this is the privilege nonsense there again. No more fear, just no more lies. My God. So now I don't know what the state of affairs are in Canada. I know Canada's a highly contaminated country. It's got that nut job Trudeau run the show, so it must be plenty of good people in Canada, but definitely become a bit of a globalist shithole now, unfortunately. But I don't know what the state is in Canada with the whole affirmative action thing, but we know that that's already something that's happening in the States. So maybe this is part of, I don't know, there's a part of Canada that's not contaminated yet with Marxism, or it's not as messed up as in the States, and they're trying to push for affirmative action there. Maybe that's what's happening here. There's also links into the thing I talked about before, where I was talking about Saul Alinsky in the last show, that the Marxist cult members, they need to constantly have some things to protest over. That's what gives them, that's what makes them so potent, is that they never rest. They're always protesting, and they'll always find things to protest about. So this is another example of that, pretty much. So that's all for this one. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Also, if you haven't done so already, please follow RR on Twitter. @ResolvingR is the handle. Also, the email address for the show is contactrr@protonmail.com, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.